Haribol, Namaste, Krishna. So I'll just chant for 10 minutes or so, and then or 15 minutes, and then we'll talk about Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, text 27 to 28. Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimate Sira Sarupananda Amazukinande Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimate Sira Sarupananda Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Srila Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajakasadhara Satta Shishima Jigakuru Siddhasarupananda Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajakasadhara Satta Shishima His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koda Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Garadara, Shivasadi Go Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Nitai Goes World Mission Ki Jai. Navadita Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath, Shamakun Radhakun, Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Vrindavanam Ki Jai, Mathuradam Ki Jai, Mayapodam Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Jamuna Mai Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees, Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga, Gaura Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. Amagena Timarandasya Ganagana Shalakaya Chaksurun Militanyena Tajmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Statpitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Swapadantekam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalan Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagujatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagapate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhi Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Suta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanshakapa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavenbhyo Vaishnavbhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Garadara Shivasadi Go Bhaktavrindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Before speaking, first offer my humble obeisances at the lotus feet of my spiritual master, Jagakuru Siddhasarupananda Srila Prabhupada, who is very dear to Lord Krishna, having taken shelter at his lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada is the mercy manifestation of Lord Chaitanya, and is very dear to Radha and Krishna. Offer my respectful obeisances to all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord, who are like wish-fulfilling trees, able to fulfill all the desires of the fallen living entities, and are full of compassion upon them. Haribol, namaste. Thank you for watching. So we're continuing on with Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, and we're almost at the end of it. And so tonight, Krishna, in texts 27 and 28, Krishna kind of changes the topic a little bit, not that much. But, in Bhagavad Gita, there's three main methods or four methods that Krishna really expounds upon at length, four different kinds of yoga, although the definition of yoga in Bhagavad Gita is very broad. Bhagavad Gita itself, Krishna describes it as being yoga. In chapter 4 text 1, where Krishna describes how he explained this science of yoga previously to Vivishwan, the sun god. So so in Bhagavad Gita, the concept of yoga is very broad. In fact, in the different commentaries of the different Vaishnava acharyas, and the first Vaishnava acharya's commentary that's looked upon significantly is Sridhar Swami's. And each of his chapters, of the 18 chapters, he calls a different kind of yoga. And so even chapter 1, where Arjuna is in distress, he describes this as distress yoga. So Arjuna is in distress, and he's communicating with Krishna about his distress. So this is a type of yoga. So this sense of yoga is very broad. And the four main types of yoga that Krishna describes in Bhagavad Gita are Kama Yoga, which sometimes he calls Buddha Yoga or Buddhi Yoga. Buddhi is intelligence. So Kama Yoga is the yoga of action. And we've been talking about Kama Yoga now for months, if not years. So Kama Yoga, the yoga of action, and the primary factor in it is working with a sense of detachment, a service attitude, performing our duties according to our constitutional position. This is constitutional position or dharma, our swabhava. This is in connection with our nature. Swabhava means my own nature. Everyone has their own nature, their own constitutional position. Now, ultimately, our real constitutional position is that we are the eternal servant of Krishna. We are Sat Chidananda, right? Eternally, Sat means eternality, Chit means cognizant or knowledge, Ananda is blissfulness. So this is our eternal nature. And we are eternal spirit soul, and we are not the supreme spirit soul, rather we're the dominated part and parcel of the supreme. And that our function as eternal spirit soul, but not the supreme soul, is to render service to the supreme soul. So this is called Sanatan Dhamma. Sanatan means eternal. This is always. This is our real eternal nature and constitutional position. And this is the essence of Bhagavad Gita, that we are eternally the servant of Krishna, that Krishna wants us to think of him and love him and render service to him, surrender to him. This is the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita in 1865 and 1866. Just as Krishna says in 1866, Sarvadhamam Parityaja. So just abandon all varieties of Dhamma. So there's this Sanatan Dhamma, which is our eternal constitutional position. We go through different bodies, different lifetimes, lifetime after lifetime, Like we're wandering in this material world, like we're birth wandering, or in samsara, the wheel of birth and death. We're going from body to body, lifetime after lifetime. And in each particular body, we have a particular swabhava or swadharma. We have our own, these are like temporary dharmas, temporary duties, temporary obligations. We have a temporary nature. Although we bring our nature with us from previous lifetimes, but nonetheless our nature changes according to our situation, according to the particular kind of body we have. Like maybe in our last life we're in a male body, now this life we're in a female body. So we have a different nature that comes with that, the characteristics of female mentality versus male mentality. So we have different natures according to our past karma and our current situation, the type of body we have. And this is a temporary nature. So in karma yoga, we have our particular kind of nature, and this is generally divided into the four varnas, or occupational duties, broad occupational duty classifications. We have within the Vedic construct or the Vedic society, there's the brahmanas, who are the priests and the educators and the medical doctors and so on, who are more in the mode of goodness, or in the mode of goodness, and they're like the head of society, the leaders or the spiritual leaders and guides in society. And then you have the kshatriyas, who are in the mode of passion. These are the warriors, the fighters, the protectors. And they, they act under the guidance of the brahmanas. So the brahmanas are likened to being like the head of society, kshatriyas are the arms. Then you have the vaishyas, who are the merchants, the bankers, the farmers. They're like producing things, making things, creating things. And they're likened to being the stomach of society. And then the shudras, or the workers, the artisans, these are the legs of society, and they render service to others. Krishna describes in chapter 18, I think in a sequence of verses in the 40s, 1840 area, where he describes the characteristics of the different varnas, the different swabhavas, or natures of people under the different modes of nature, and the different occupational duties that they have accordingly. And so karma yoga means to act according to our particular constitutional position within the different varnas, but to act in a detached manner. I perform this occupational duty because it's my duty. And Krishna, explains in chapter 4, I think text 13, that he has created this varna system, this chaito varna. Chaita means four. So Krishna has created this chaito varna system. And so, in karma yoga we appreciate, Krishna has created this system. And so I'm fulfilling my duties and obligations in accordance with his arrangement for society. Along with these different varnas, there's the ashramas, the four spiritual orders of life, or statuses of life. This is brahmacharya, the celibate students, the grihastas, the householders, the vanaprasthas, or those who are retired, and the sannyasis, those who have renounced this world. So so one falls within a different combination of varna and ashrama. And so in karma yoga one fulfills their occupational duties according to these different varnas and ashramas. And ultimately, in the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna finally says, is building up to the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita, that one should perform these duties as worship to the Supreme Lord, to God, the Supreme Person. So so in the conclusion of Bhagavad Gita, like throughout Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks about Kama Yoga, many different ways and many different chapters, always of fulfilling one's duty, and in the whole construct of Bhagavad Gita, the conversation between Arjuna and Krishna. Arjuna's not wanting to perform his varnashramic duty, his dharma. He doesn't want to perform it. Right, and I've talked about this many, many times. Right, as Prabhupada's talked about it many times. Devotees of Krishna have talked about this many, many times over the centuries and millennia. How Arjuna doesn't want to perform his duty according to his dharmic situation. So in many ways, this whole conversation of Bhagavad Gita is about performing one's duty. So this is Karma Yoga. One should perform one's duty with a detachment, in a detached manner, without attachment to the results. When Krishna is first describing what Karma Yoga is in the second chapter, he says to Arjuna that you're not entitled to the results. You're entitled to perform your duty, but you're not entitled to the results. So one should feel that one is performing one's duty for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. And so one should be acting in a mood of sacrifice and a mood of offering. So like Krishna says in chapter 9, that all that you do and all that you offer and all that you give away, all this should be done for me. So this is the mood of Karma Yoga, of performing service, serving others. This is always beneficial, right? Like, give up being so self-centered. So this is a brief overview of Karma Yoga. And Krishna's described Karma Yoga at length in chapter 2. Again in chapter 3, of course, at the beginning of chapter 3, Arjuna is like a bit confused because chapter 2, in the second half of the chapter, Krishna gives kind of an overview of different things. He talks about Karma Yoga and performing one's duty. Then he talks about the Vedas and how the Vedas are limited and one shouldn't perform sacrifice and Vedic duties with the desire to enjoy the results. And then he talks about one who's wise and attaining samadhi. And Arjuna asks, well, how does such a person behave? How do they sit? How do they walk? And so on. And then Krishna begins sort of describing more the path of Jnana Yoga, where there's a person who's pursuing the knowledge path. So there's different kinds of people. Some people are active, very active. They want to do stuff. They're doing stuff. You ask them to sit down and study philosophy, they can't do it. But then there's people who they're not active. They're thinkers, munis. In fact, in the verses where in 528, Krishna talks about munis. So munis are great thinkers. They analyze and they think, they ponder. Some people they're just not into that. The vast majority of people are not into that. They're not thinkers, they're just doers. And so for those who are thinkers, the munis, those who are in pursuit of knowledge is their goal. So for most people, action is the goal of some sort. Generally speaking, known as karmis or fruitive workers, right? They want to enjoy the fruits of their work. That they're like working so hard. Like in Hawaii here, people are working 2, 3, 4 jobs. They're working all the time. The struggle for existence. And they're working for their own to get fruit that they can enjoy. This is like the nature of fruitive activity. Of course, it becomes better when they're working and they have a family to support and they're working to support their wife and their children. So this also is a type of karma yoga. Like a higher form of karma yoga is to feel I'm just performing my duty for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. I'm not entitled to the fruits. I'm offering my life to the Supreme Lord. This is how I'm serving you, Krishna. This is a higher form of karma yoga. So a lower form of karma yoga is like, well, someone is just, they're earning money and they're supporting their family. And they're staying in the marriage and they're not having illicit affairs, and they have children. They're doing their best to bring their children up as best they can. So this is a lower type of karma yoga. At least they're following the structure of society that Krishna has created. So this is good. Then of course you have those who are even lower, who are like, well, they have no regard for the institutions of society and they're just hedonists. But within the Vedic construct, even this is potentially seen as a positive, in the sense that, well, eventually a person will get sick of this, they'll get frustrated, become angry and frustrated, and they'll begin to ponder, well, is there some greater meaning to life? Like, I'm burning myself out. Now, of course, sometimes, unfortunately, devotees may hear this kind of point and they'll think, oh, well, I've just got to get it out of my system. I've just got to go I've just got to go and enjoy and get it out of my system. So of course this is not pleasing. This is not what I'm suggesting. The idea is, and it's contained in the 7th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the discussion between Narada Muni and Maharaj Yudhisthira, that a person can get like, if they try to engage so much to enjoy the world, that it can just become so much that it becomes like, if you pour too much ghee on a fire, it just extinguishes the fire. So there's a balance when you're pouring ghee on a fire. You don't put too much on, otherwise you're just going to flood it and stop the fire, which you don't want to do. You want to keep the fire going. So, but sometimes, like in trying to enjoy the senses and being a hedonist, you can just engage in so much sense gratification that it just becomes repulsive to you. It becomes, oh, I've had enough. Right? So, in this sense, within the Vedic conception or view, even this can be seen as like on the path towards eventual liberation. Right? One gets burnt out and then starts to pursue the path of spiritual life, like seeking answers. Why am I here? What's the purpose of this? Is this really the goal of life? Is just try to enjoy my senses to the extreme? But when I do that, I just experience frustration. So anyway, so we have the path of karma yoga. Then we have the path of knowledge yoga, jnana yoga, where a person is philosophically inclined. And then Krishna begins to speak tonight, just in a couple of verses. And he touched on it very briefly in chapter 4, speaking with Arjuna about the different kinds of activities or sacrifices that ultimately result in knowledge. And Krishna spoke there in chapter 4 about some aspects of Astanga yoga, meditation type yoga. So here in chapter 5, Krishna has been describing karma yoga, like Arjuna again at the beginning of chapter 5. He's asking Krishna, look, I'm confused. You're talking about knowledge. Like in chapter 4, Krishna talks about the glories of transcendental knowledge. So Arjuna gets confused because he thinks that the pursuit of knowledge means to, well, don't engage in action, retire, go to the hills and just chant japa, or study philosophy under a spiritual master and just study all day. This is Arjuna's kind of misconception of what transcendental knowledge is. And when Krishna is glorifying transcendental knowledge, Arjuna is kind of confused about what it really means, what the path of jnana yoga means. So Krishna, of course, then describes again, as he did in chapter 3, how no, these are just the one path. They're all heading to the same goal. Like the karma yogi, he's working with detachment. And one who's a jnana yogi, studying knowledge, well, through the pursuit of knowledge, he learns detachment. And so one has to be detached to be able to detached from this material world, understanding that I'm not this body, that this material world is false, it's temporary. There's no happiness here. There's no ultimate happiness here. In my relationships with others, I should realize, well, they're not their body. And in that sense, foster a sense of detachment. This doesn't mean that, I don't care about others. No one who has knowledge actually cares. One of the verses Krishna describes them as being the highest welfare, hitta. Aspiring the benefit, working for the benefit of others, because you actually understand who they are. Understanding that they're spirit soul, eternal servant of Krishna, but somehow or other they're in this material world and they're covered by ignorance. And as a result of this ignorance, they're transmigrating from body to body, experiencing birth, diseases, old age, and death, and so on. So I have great compassion upon others, and I try and help others. And I love others as my brothers and sisters. We're all related. So it's not that this detachment means a hard-hearted, I don't care about you, I only care about me and my liberation. This can be the potential danger of one is pursuing liberation, is that I can become only concerned about myself and my liberation. I'm wanting to get free from this material world, so I become like, oh no, I don't want to be entangled. So we become hard-hearted to our relatives and don't want anything to do with them. We see them as entanglement, something that's getting in the way of my spiritual pursuits. It's getting in the way of my desire for liberation. This is kind of like, Prabhupada has spoken about how, the Buddhist path is very difficult. It's very difficult to apply practically, because the whole path of Buddhism is about becoming, detached from everything, and then ultimately recognizing, well, no one exists, and I just, want to merge into the void and cease existing. That this is liberation. So, and it's, and the whole question of, well, who is it who's on the wheel of birth and death? They don't really have an answer. It's all very confusing. So then a person, but the goal is liberation and to cease existing and understand that actually you don't exist. And so then it's very confusing. I'm a Buddhist and I've got my wife and my children. Well, how do I relate to them? It's not a philosophy that one can really apply on a practical level in dealings with practical life. So anyway, so we want to avoid that misconception of feeling that detachment means that I don't care about others and I only care about my own liberation. It's actually the opposite. One cares about others more for their material and spiritual well-being. For their physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. So anyway, Krishna's described this knowledge path, this path of knowledge, the Jnana Yoga path. And now, or as I was mentioning, Krishna's already spoken a little bit about the mystic yoga path, or the yoga path, or what Krishna describes as dhyana yoga in some part of Bhagavad Gita describes it as dhyana yoga. Dhyana means meditation. So it's meditation yoga. And so Krishna describes it here, and this is the third type main yoga path that Krishna describes. But he doesn't describe it nearly as much as how he describes Karma Yoga or Jnana, knowledge yoga. And of course, the fourth and major path of yoga that Krishna describes, he also describes sannyas yoga, and so there's different kinds of yoga that Krishna mentions and brings up. But the fourth major kind, and in fact, of course, the most important kind, is bhakti yoga. The yoga of love and devotion. So, heart yoga, right? If we have Karma yoga is yoga of action, and you have Jnana yoga, the yoga of the knowledge seeking, so in other words, the mind and the intellect. And then we have in Bhakti yoga, we have yoga at the heart, developing one's love for Krishna. And so love, like sometimes there's like a saying, love conquers all. Right? So it's like, love is the strongest emotion. Just sort of physical, doing stuff, well, it's okay. Performing one's duty, so a sense of performing duty and obligation and responsibility, right? So I'm performing duty like this with a great sense of performing my duty, but there isn't necessarily love there. So I might be engaged in Karma Yoga, but I'm not acting out of love. So in that sense, it's not Bhakti Yoga. And in the pursuit of the path of knowledge, well, I can be, I'm studying and I'm reading about Krishna and I'm studying Krishna's words, but I don't have love for Krishna. So this is not Bhakti Yoga. So Bhakti Yoga is the path of love. So of course when I speak about Bhakti Yoga as being the path of love, like this, love for Krishna and love for all living beings as parts and parcels of Krishna. Of course this is very nice. And ultimately it's the path of love according to the different flavors of love or rasas that are in the spiritual relationships with Krishna. Of being Krishna's servant, being Krishna's friend, so Dasya rasa, and then Sakya rasa, and then parenthood, Vatsalya rasa, so a familial relationship, and then of course Madhura rasa, the highest rasa, the rasa of love. When I say the highest rasa, this is how Ramananda Roy analyzed it in his conversation with Lord Chaitanya. And so it's understood that within the hierarchies of love, well, naturally the love between a lover and the beloved, that's the strongest flavor of love that there is. But this doesn't mean that it's the only important rasa, or to think that somehow that the gopis are higher than, say, Mother Yasoda. In fact, this was a comment Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada made one time in Los Angeles. There was some devotees in the ISKCON temple. They formed what was called a Gopi Bhava club. And they were getting together, 40 or 50 disciples, and getting together, and they were reading about the gopis' love for Krishna. And they were doing this kind of in a secretive way, and they were studying the bhava, or the love of the gopis for Krishna. So when Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada heard of this, he was furious. And he said, so they're thinking that the gopis' love is higher than Mother Yasoda's love. So he became very angry and made them stop doing this. And he said, first deserve, then desire. In other words, one has to be purified of one's material desires and material misconceptions before one can enter into the loving relationships between the gopis and Krishna. So one should not prematurely try and force oneself into these intimate, loving relationships that Krishna has with his devotees. So we're a little bit on the outside hearing about them. But before we desire to enter in there and start trying to artificially enter into these loving pastimes of Krishna, first we have to deserve. In other words, we have to be purified. And how do we become purified? Is through in the path of bhakti yoga, of sadhana bhakti. Purification through the processes of hearing and chanting. Hearing and chanting. So anyway, so bhakti yoga that's the fourth main yoga path, and that's the most important path. So here in this verse, Krishna is saying, shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils. Thus, controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence, the transcendentalist becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated. So Krishna is describing in the text 27. So these two verses are generally speaking studied as together because it's like it's like a sentence. So like to get the full sentence, the verses are studied together. But so Krishna has been speaking about Kama Yoga, and then he's speaking about Sankhya, or knowledge yoga, jnana, and about how a person who's liberated, how they behave, how they think, they're seeing equally, they're controlling the senses, they're devoid of anger and lust, kama, and anger, krodha. Krishna, as we saw in several verses, Krishna described this, and then Krishna is describing how they're experiencing their pleasure within. And so Krishna now in these two verses is describing a way that a person who's come to that level, who's detached, how they can actually become self-realized, in other words, realize the soul through the process of dhyana yoga. Or it can also be seen as an alternative process. Right? Although, of course, this process also requires, everyone has to act, so it entails detached action, and there also has to be some knowledge. So, and even bhakti yoga, of course, is based upon action and knowledge. So anyway, so Krishna is saying, spasan kritva bahir bahyams, chakshus chayavantare bruvaho, Pranapana samao kritva nasha bhayantara karinao. So spasan, these are the external sense objects such as sound, etc. Kritva, doing so. Bahi, bahihi, external. Bahyan, unnecessary. So shutting out all external sense objects. So to shut out all external sense objects, well, how do we do this? So we have to chakshus, the eyes, chaya, cha, also eva, certainly, antare, within, bruvaho, of the eyebrows. So keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows. This is like and we have to be careful, can't have the eyes completely open, otherwise we'll be seeing external sense objects. But if we shut the eyes, then there'll be the tendency to fall asleep. So one should have the eyes half open and focus between the eyebrows, sometimes described as the third eye, or on the tip of the nose, as Krishna describes in the 6th chapter. By doing this can still thoughts, because it's hard to do, and if you do it, then it can focus the mind and control thoughts. And then prana apana samao kritva, so prana apana, up and down moving air, samao, in suspension, kritva, doing so, nasha abantara, within nostrils, karinao, blowing. So controlling the breathing process. So Krishna's actually just, the inward breath and the outward breath, and actually suspending the breath within the nostrils. So it's like, this is the process of pranayama, slowing down the breathing and focusing on the breath, and even here actually stopping the breathing process. So this is like a yoga process to help control the mind and then be able to focus inward and actually then realize the self. So then Krishna goes on to say, Yatendriya mano buddhi here. So yata, controlled, indriya, the senses, manaha, the mind, buddhihi, the intelligence. So thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence. And then munihi, the transcendentalist, moksha, liberation, parayanaha, being so desired. So the muni, so like I was saying, muni, thinker, great thinkers, right? So the transcendentalist or the muni becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. So vigata, discarded, icha, wishes, so desires, or bhaya, fear. Everyone's so fearful, there's always fear. What's going to happen? What's going to go wrong? We're always expecting things to go wrong, and things do go wrong. Like in my service, there's always things going wrong. Problems all the time, every day. Customers hassling, how do we deal with them? We're worried they're going to steal from us, or they're coming in and being crazy and doing all kinds of disgusting things, or they're threatening to sue us. Then you got team members who you're having to deal with, you have to terminate some of them, and then you got to worry, are they going to sue us? It's just like never-ending different problems. So fear, so becoming free from desire, so controlling one's desires, fear, and anger. If we control our desires, then generally there's going to be a lot less anger. A lot of anger comes from frustration, that our desires aren't being fulfilled. So if we're able to become tolerant and free from desire, then generally speaking, anger doesn't arise. So one who's always in this state is certainly liberated. Yaha, one who sada, always, muktaha, liberated, eva, certainly, saha, he is. So this is a practical process of yoga, controlling, being able to focus the mind, controlling one's breath, controlling one's desires, and that this leads to liberation. So in the next verse, which is the conclusion of this chapter 5, Krishna speaks about actual realization of him, who he is, and how all these processes are actually performed, to come to the understanding that Krishna is the Supreme Person. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Haribo, namaste. Thank you so much. Krishna, Krishna Krishna.